So on to our featured speaker. Our featured speaker is Terin Williams. Hi Terin, thanks for being here, for making the trip up from Columbus. Terin works for Department of Homeland Security, specifically CISA. She's the District 5 security advisor. And what that basically means is that she's in charge of Ohio, right? So she gets called all the time. She's in Cleveland a lot. And a lot of the people that we've spoken to about this event, I've seen Terin speak before, or had her participate in tabletop exercises or presentations or those kind of things. So,
here recently, and I would tell you that at least from my foxhole, no way, it hasn't. I will tell you, however, in Ohio, right when the Russia-Ukraine conflict kicked off, we did have about a 6-month slower period, right? Like it slowed down quite a bit. I bet you can imagine why. But in terms of just activity and that sort of thing, not at all. I'll talk a little bit about an evolution of the threat actor in the presentation, so I won't jump into that yet. But I will tell you that we have seen a shift, at least in one variant, very recently, that's kind of night and day from the other activity that we've seen in the past. So again, I'll talk through that piece. The one thing I will say, and I am jumping ahead, but business email compromise, and I know we've had several conversations prior to kicking this thing off with you guys about business email compromise, but that is more prevalent than ransomware. You just don't hear about it as much because it's not as sexy. The media doesn't like it as much because it affects like your executives and your financial folks and maybe a couple of other people, and that's it. No one else in the organization feels it or knows it, right? They feel it, they just don't realize they feel it. But it's not direct. Business email compromise, if you're not familiar with it, like I said, it's more prevalent than ransomware. But it's essentially when they get your users typically to click a link, open an attachment, they compromise their email, and then they essentially impersonate that person, right? And then they start to impersonate your organization and other organizations that you work with. And they essentially create this entire persona, fake persona, where money starts to get passed around to the wrong places, to different places, right? And it just trends in Ohio. So I was at Representative Turner's event a couple weeks ago, and I told him, a year ago I spoke there, and I talked about healthcare, water plants, and schools being kind of the top 3 that were really getting hit in Ohio. This year, I've seen transportation, manufacturing, and those are probably the big ones. Like manufacturing and transportation are really the big targets right now for us. Of course, they're still doing the little cast the wide net, get the little, all the little fish type thing. So, in the big scheme of things for the criminal groups, it doesn't really matter who you are, right? If you happen to be one of the slower runners, you're going to get hit, right? And so, you don't have to run faster than the bear, just run faster than the snake. So, day to day, I probably start my day in incident response, unfortunately. There hopefully will be a day when that doesn't happen and I actually have a life. But until then, typically, you guys come in the morning, somebody's been compromised overnight. If you don't know this, the threat actors love holidays, weekends, and nights because they know that your technical folks, if you are technical folks, are not there at that time and not as vigilant. And even if you have alerts, you may be ignoring them because your kids or your family, whatever. So that's when they're most active. So usually come in the morning. I've got a couple of partners that need assistance, and then every day is different. I could be in a Jewish synagogue one day. I could be in a water plant the next day. I could be in a hospital the next day, chemical company, and then potentially we'll call it manufacturing company, right? So I have probably. I'm not diagnosed, but I probably have severe ADHD. So that variety helps me a lot because it's like every day is a new adventure. So we cover all 16 critical infrastructure sectors, and I would say water plants are probably our most underserved community in my opinion. But other than that, pretty much probably have a county or city hit daily almost. And then And then on top of that, I'm responsible for your resiliency. So I'm supposed to keep you from getting hit. I just gotta climb out of that hole and quit responding to incidents.
How important is it in your opinion? Right? So, the consensus says have an incident response plan and plan to get attacks. Right? Yeah, I think in general the security community is not important.
Right.
So, do you think that incident response trumps other things in security, or how important is it?
So you almost had me when you said trust other things, and then I'm like, I wouldn't necessarily say it trumps other things, right? We have me dancing now. It's important though, because what I'll say is, no plan is going to survive first contact, right? And so a lot of you do the check the block and you do the incident response plan, and you've never actually rehearsed it. You don't have a clue what it really says. And guess what? If it's ransomware, they usually encrypt your incident response plan. So then you're really screwed, right? Because you don't even know what you said you were going to do. So I think in that respect, putting due diligence against the fact that you're going to know what to have to, it's the same thing with, we do it with our kids, right? We teach them what to do in case of a fire, in case of a tornado, in case, whatever the case may be. It needs to be muscle memory. You've got to do it over and over so that you know it, because when, and again, if any of you are military, you all know that when you're in a firefight, everything goes, everything you thought you were going to do, it just kind of goes, and people just do things that you're like, what are you doing? But it happens. So having that, being able to do that muscle memory in incident response, and really get after the fact that what your calls are. I will tell you, so I'm going to go off kilter a little bit on a tangent, but I had a hospital, and I tell this story often, so you guys may have heard this if you've heard me speak before, but I had a hospital that had a brilliant plan in terms of how they were going to do manual operations to maintain critical functions of the hospital in the event of a cyber incident, right? They sent me their plan. I looked at it. I was like, "This is brilliant. You should share this. This is this is definitely a best practice." So lo and behold, they get hit a couple of months later, right? And I don't remember what the time frame was, but it was a little ways after that. And I get the call, and I'm headed to the hospital, and I'm like, this sucks that they got hit, but this is going to be awesome. Like, they have a plan. We're going to see this thing in full, And I roll up, and it was full chaos. And I'm like, what? Why are we doing this? Why are you going to do this? Why didn't you just implement your plan? And it was all based on color-coded index cards. So the nurses, they had rehearsed, they knew what, they had not rehearsed, they knew what they were supposed to do, what color they needed, what they were using different colors for, but they had never rehearsed it, so they didn't have the card stock, so they couldn't do it, right? And so it was that entire manual, again, a little different than incident response, but ultimately, and I would say there's a lot of, when you start walking through the actual incident, you realize that you've got a lot of gaps in your plan, that if you do that in peacetime, it's a lot better than doing it under fire. It's just, like you're thinking clearly, you've had sleep, you've eaten something other than, pizza and subs for 8 days. It's definitely better to go ahead and tackle that stuff. Now, again, in comparison to other things, I guess it depends on what the other things are, right? But I would say, I would definitely put that up there towards the top, just because, I don't know, if I'm going to go into a fight, I want to train for it, right? Like, I don't want to walk up and figure it out on the fly. So. Sir?
So should TikTok be banned in your opinion?
The app?
Yeah.
Or so app, absolutely. If you're going to TikTok on the browser, go for it. They don't do anything with that, or at least nothing that I can prove. But we've reverse engineered the app, and it's literally like just sucking everything out of there. So I would say, now what they're doing with it, I could sit here and make all kinds of stories up, but I don't know exactly what they're going to do with all your data. But I also know that we reverse engineered, and I don't think this is any secret, but some of their cameras too. Hik Vision, I don't know if I say these right. But Hikvision, Doha, I don't know what it's called, but there's a couple of cameras out there. Same exact thing. You run that thing, put it on your network, walk through the packet capture, you'll see. That feed is going somewhere outside your environment if you allow it. So just close that stuff off.